You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello and welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Today we have Joe Frigolette, who spent 10 years transforming Fortune 500 companies around the globe. He now empowers small business owners through his Profits to Pockets program. Unlock your true potential, increase your profits, and live a life of freedom without regrets. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome to have you here. So I'm so excited about this lovely episode because you are going to share with us behind the scenes mess in huge corporations. I'm sure everybody wants to hear about this. So start filling us in on what you experienced and what's perceived with corporation and what's really going down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited and I'm really honored to be here on your podcast talking about this topic today, and excited to see where this conversation goes.
Awesome. Okay.
So as you mentioned, I spent 10 years consulting for major corporations, seeing behind the scenes how they operate, how they structured, for better or for worse. And I got into the career expecting that it was all going to be sunshine and rainbow, right? Expecting to hear of all the success stories, to learn the tips and tricks, all the trade secrets that major corporations around the globe are using. And while I did learn a lot of that, what I also learned that I wasn't expecting was a lot of the challenges, a lot of the struggles that these companies have behind the scenes. They may have a very well-polished product that they present to the marketplace. And we think from a consumer perspective that because they have a well-polished product and advertising, that everything about the company is equally as polished. And much to my surprise, that was very seldom the case.
So you went in and you thought, oh my goodness, this is like a teenager's messy room in here, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Okay. Which is actually, I know we have that perception, but I kind of do know things are a mess in corporations because I coach very high level CEOs, and I agree. It's never what we perceive. So what did you find when you went into the teenager's messy room?
A lot of surprises. There's a lot of things under the bed that were swept under there that they didn't want you to find, that we uncovered accidentally or through the grapevine. But I'll give an example. So, for example, with there's a regulation that came out, GDPR, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, the Global Data Protection Regulation.
Yes.
It went into effect in May 2018, but it was announced May 2016. So they gave companies all across the EU 2 years of a head start to prepare for it. And they said, hey, they outlined all of the restrictions, ramifications, everything that a company needed to know to prepare. And lo and behold, June of 2018, a couple weeks after everything went into effect, companies are just now scrambling, trying to figure out, or were just then scrambling, trying to figure out how they were going to be compliant, because there was very, very serious penalties and very serious ramifications for not being compliant. And, this is something that I saw across the board with companies in different industries of all.
Is not being proactive with planning for deadlines for very important stuff.
Yeah.
They're putting out fires, so they're not doing longer term planning and operations so they run smoothly. And it's like a panic at the last minute.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you were working for these people, were you working for a company as a consultant?
I was working for a boutique consulting agency. So I joined when we were small. We were about 300 people. And over the 7 years that I was at that company, we grew and scaled and acquired a company out of Asia Pacific, grew organically into Europe. So I was on the ground floor of moving to London and building up our European practice there, which is an amazing privilege in and of itself. While I was there, I saw a lot of different companies behind the scenes in all different industries and all different shapes and sizes.
Awesome. Okay. So what else did you find? Like give us a lot of different problems and what needs to change. There's a fix. It's not just about like, here are these problems. what were the problems and what would you do? I mean, legit on this podcast, let's do some problem solving right now so that people might have that problem and you're going to give them the solution right now. I think that'd be really interesting.
Definitely. And I'm going to keep an undertone or theme that you mentioned, which I love, is being reactive instead of proactive. And this was something I saw for so many different areas. And it was very surprising, very disappointing actually, because they have so many resources. So you think that if anybody could be proactive, it could be a company that has 100,000 employees. You know, you think they could find some group of people to dedicate to the future planning, but much to my surprise, it was a very reactive environment. So I'll give an example. You know, one company that I was working for was a major holding company. Okay, so over the course of 50 years, they had evolved and had acquired a number of different companies all in their same industry. And they wanted to be the biggest player. So one year they would acquire company A, then company B, etc. And it got to the point where they had 25 different companies that they had absorbed all under the umbrella. And there was no consistency. There's no synergies, like zero communication from one company to the next. It was literally just a holding company. They said, hey, continue doing your operations the way that you've been doing. You're successful. Don't change a thing. Now you just roll up to us. And if you do that one or two times, you know, that's fine. But if you do that 25 times, it becomes very, very messy. And it's a lot more difficult to now try to bring everybody together when they're so decentralized and so fragmented.
Okay, so what's the solution there? The solution would have been from the get-go, set that up properly, right?
It would be. Yeah, it would be established standards and consistencies and centralize some of the function, right? Centralize some of your HR function and your finance function. So that way you don't have 25 different HR teams, 25 different finance teams, 25 different C-suite executive committees that all are used to being the most important and most powerful people in their company. But then now when they're told that they're just one of 25, it's a jab to their ego a little bit.
Do you think there was a method to the madness, or do you think this was just easier for them in the moment?
I think it was easier for them in the moment.
Got it. So we have a theme here, easier for them in the moment. So theme number one, don't do things because it's easier in the moment because it's going to be harder later on. So Joe, how did you fix that problem?
One brick at a time is how we fixed that problem. So so there was a new executive team that had come in after all of the acquisitions were put in place. You know, so the original founder and CEO retired, stepped away, and a new executive team came in and they saw the future. They said, hey, we need to unite this business in order to compete because all of our competitors in some regards are much further ahead of us. And a big part of that was their back end digital office. You know, so how HR and how finance manages and tracks all of their metrics. So they decided to implement the new HR and finance back end system to be the vehicle to facilitate the business. And during that process, so again, what we realized is that the technology alone can't be the single uniting factor. You know, sure, you have to have all of the companies on the same technological platform so that the executive company can, you know, get all of the metrics consistent.
Yes.
But that alone can't be the thing that unites everybody.
Right.
But that was sort of the approach. So the project started with a big bang idea of, hey, let's gather requirements for all of our entities and let's throw them all into the system together and we'll figure it out along the way. And a couple of years and many, many millions of dollars were spent going down that path only to pause and say, hold on a second, we actually need to break this down into smaller chunks if we want to be successful. So that's what we ended up having to do. We had to pivot the whole project, uniting over 100,000 workers and 25 legal entities around the world. Instead of doing it all at once, we had to break it down and do it, you know, one or two at a time and establish some standards along the way.
So a huge job was created that could have been really avoided, right? If they had just done a little bit of work, less work up front with structuring.
Yeah, if they had been more proactive and properly planning and communicating out, you know, that's another another theme that I want to get into today is the communication of it all to get everybody on the same page, all of the entities and all of the employees, and it would have been a much, much different effort to try to unite the businesses.
However, it was probably quicker for them at the time to do that. It's probably a quicker thing, right?
To try to do it all at once?
No, the way they did it was probably the mess that was made. It was probably just because it was quick in the moment.
I don't know if it was quick. I think it was a result of not having the right people making the decisions that had the right level of background knowledge and expertise.
Okay, so there's also a delegation problem.
Yeah, it's a delegation problem, or even a thorough vendor selection problem. You know, there's a lot of different things that we could.
So there was some carelessness, a little bit of carelessness along the way, as vendor selection, planning, SOPs, just a bunch. Okay, it sounds like a huge company. If they have 100,000 employees, you're saying?
That's right.
Okay, we won't say who it is, but that's a huge company. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and they're in over 100 countries.
We probably all know this company, right?
Very surprisingly, a company that's that big still operates in the shadow. We see their products, we see their end, their end products to the marketplace all the time, but they don't say that this was.
I understand.
Delivered by them because they represent a number of other clients.
Okay, so what is a common problem and the mess that goes on behind these big? Apart from that, that's huge. That's a very exceptional one. What are some things that you just saw all the time that could be fixed?
All the time, I would say a disconnect between human resources and finance. In some companies, HR is in charge. And whatever the CHRO or whoever the lead person is with the HR office, whatever they say goes. Other companies, whatever the CFO or the lead finance individual says goes. And that's really dependent on industry. I've seen companies that are more focused at their core on numbers. So financial services companies, if the CFO says something, everybody gets in line.
Right.
They put out a mandate and everybody follows that. Versus, marketing company, for example, the CHRO or the CMO puts out a directive and people fall in line and they're not as willingly listening to the CFO.
Right.
But consistently across the board, I've seen a divide between the finance office and the HR office and an inconsistency in how they're measuring the business.
And so what are the problems then? If they're not all communicating, what are the problems you've seen as a result of this lack of communication?
It comes down to siloed operations and narrow-minded focus. Right? Having somebody that's only thinking about their role and what's in it for their job and not thinking about the bigger picture of the business and not having somebody to help connect the dots.
Right.
So I'll give you an example of a metric like headcount. Right? You think that a company's headcount is a company's headcount. But even within a company, there can be many different ways and different offices that are calculating headcount differently. So the CFO might have one number and the CHRO has another number.
How? There's a head or there's a head?
You would think so.
Right.
Right? Companies come up with all these exceptions. They say, oh, well, certain types of workers don't count. Like the contract workers or the contingent workers don't count. Or part-time workers don't count.
Got it.
Or maybe a part-time worker counts as 0.5. So then it becomes, are we counting the body? Are we counting the physical human being, the head?
Yes.
Or are we counting their full-time equivalent?
Types of heads. Yes. Okay, so don't do that. So basically, the communication piece, people have to communicate. What did you see was happening with those companies where they weren't communicating with the CFO or the HR or the marketing person? Were they losing money?
Yes, absolutely. And they were losing money by way of being inefficient and wasting resources. And the bigger the company, the more inefficient they seem, or the more efficient they are, the more wasteful they are with the resources. Where, I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where all the company needed was one person to make a decision.
Right.
And say, this is what we're doing for a small decision. Doesn't have to be anything game changing for them necessarily. But it becomes a bunch of people running around in circles trying to find somebody to make a decision.
Right. It's like the whole thing about committees. Committees is a bunch of people there's that whole joke about what a committee is. Basically, a committee gets together to not move forward. You don't have committees in the military because somebody makes a decision in the military. They have the power. They make a decision. If they had committees in the military, they would never do anything. They would never take any action. They wouldn't make any decisions. So what you're saying is it's the committee mentality. A bunch of unqualified people making unqualified opinions about whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you're saying get rid of the committee mentality and have somebody in charge that says, I have the authority to make a decision one way or the other.
Yeah. You got to empower your leaders.
Yes, I agree. Because otherwise nothing happens. It's just a bunch of people trying to block. Okay.
And what I'll say from there, what it becomes is a bunch of people wasting time and just trying to get through the day, to get through the week, to get through the quarter, to get through the year, to get to the next promotion.
Yes.
And it's a bunch of people that are passing the ball around to each other.
Right.
I don't want to do this work, you do it. I don't want to make this decision, you make it.
Right.
And they're just trying to not ruffle any feathers to get to the point of the next promotion to ask for a little bit more money.
It's a nightmare. There's no leadership there. So tell me, now you're working with small businesses. So what are some things that all businesses need to do to get to growth, profits, and freedom? What are those things that just the most common things that you can help people sort out right now? What are those things?
But the number one thing, I cannot stress this enough to small business owners that we work with. The number one thing that separates any company from their competitors. Are you ready? They need to establish their market dominating position. So market dominating position is what is so different about your company and your offering and your people that is so compelling that people want to do business with you.
Right. It's like a USP, unique selling proposition.
It's like a USP, but it takes it one step further.
Right. It's that I agree with that. I agree. When I work with people, it's like, we got to make your offer so much better. We talked about that. We make your offer so much better than all the other offers out there that they can't even compare it. So I agree with that. So that's the first thing, is to make it a really compelling offer or business model, right?
So I would actually put those two things as separate. So you need to uniquely position yourself so you can dominate the market. Right. And then you also need a compelling offer.
Exactly. Okay. So that's the first thing. Compelling offer, fantastic positioning. Okay. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Then what else?
And so then the next thing is a rock solid pricing strategy.
I agree with that.
And there's some psychology behind pricing. And
there is
different buckets of pricing that a lot of folks don't necessarily think about. And they come up with a price and they set that price. But I can't tell you how many times I sit down with a small business owner and I ask them, the question of, hey, inflation has been pretty significant in the last few years. There's a rising cost of goods. When's the last time you actually increased your prices? And they just look at me, they just are frozen. They're like, well, they're worried that if they increase their prices, they're going to lose their clients. They're going to lose their customers. But a lot of the times, as long as you can justify why you're increasing the prices and explain that narrative, then you're not going to have an issue.
Right.
And I'll give some examples here. So Starbucks, in 2016, decided that they were going to raise the prices of all of their drink items by 5 to 20 cents. And so that's a 1 to 2% increase in prices. But for that year, what that did, that drove an 11% increase in their revenue, an additional $2 billion to their revenue just by a slight increase in their prices.
Because of the number of items as in cups being sold. So that for those kinds of companies, that is game changing when it's that kind of volume. Okay, so we agree on that. Okay, so what's the third thing?
So I would say number one is market dominating position. Number two is compelling offer. Number three is pricing strategy.
Yes.
Number four would be product bundling. And it goes hand in, all of these things play into each other, right? But it goes hand in hand with compelling offer of, a lot of the times we'll have product A and then product B and then product C. But how do we pull all of those together to create an irresistible package? So it's not only the positioning of, why is the company irresistible? Why is pricing, or why is your offer irresistible? Why is your pricing irresistible? But the package of how you bundle things together can skyrocket sales and skyrocket net profits as well.
Okay, awesome. Okay, now what about operations? Because we were talking about operations. So this is more the offer and all of that.
Sure.
I love it, but I do feel that the operations is a big thorn in the side of most companies. So what do you suggest to fix once they have all that in place? So they have
Okay.
their wonderful product pricing, bundling, everything. But as you know, and I know, like you were just talking about that, these companies that have all great stuff, like they're amazing.
Right.
So what is the interior work that companies need to do, even small companies, to not get in those messes of the large corporations?
Very good question. I would say it's creating systems and putting the
Mhm.
right people in place.
Okay.
And being, we hear this all the time of hire slow,
Yeah.
fire fast,
Mhm.
right? Do a very, very thorough job in bringing the right people aboard and giving them the
Mhm.
right training,
Mhm.
and then empowering them in their role to be able to make
Mm.
decisions and discern what's
Mhm.
in the best interest of the company. And that can have a
Mhm.
huge impact. I've
Mm.
seen it too often where great talent is stifled by too much red tape,
Mm.
too
Yes.
much bureaucracy. And you might have somebody that has a lot of ambition and has great ideas, but
Mhm.
they're not given the right tools to be able to execute on that.
So you're saying that once they get all the product stuff, awesome. The operations part is SOPs, standard operating procedures, and
Yeah.
finding the right people and training them. Now, I couldn't agree more with you. People say they're going to plug people in, and I just cringe. You don't plug people in. You hire people, you mentor, you coach, you guide, you make sure that they're developing because it's not a plug-in thing. When I hear that, I'm like, what do you mean? You don't plug people in and they're just
Right.
like bingo. It is a progression. It is a process of helping people get better at their job, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
So you agree with me. So that's really one of the problems is hiring people that possibly could do the job well and then nurturing them in the role and not just having this attitude, okay, you're in there, go do your job, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And
Okay.
I would even say one step further of not only empowering them to do well at their job, but
Mm,
empowering them to be a better human being and
right.
to grow as a human being. Because we are people at the end of the day, right?
Right.
And the
Well,
bigger
people
the
at the beginning
company,
of the day as well.
yeah, but all throughout the day, we're human beings,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
A lot of the times, companies look at somebody, to your point, as just a number or just a role.
Mm,
And they go, oh, I
mm,
need a person to fill XYZ role.
mm,
And they sort of draw the box, but they don't take
mm.
into account the personal differences and nuances that human being brings to the table.
Also, dealing with human beings, there are always issues too, and not bad issues. There's human life, like your employees or team members or however it is the agreement you have, they're going to have personal problems at some point. And I think when people are hiring, they're not hiring for that. They're like, oh, no, it's not a robot. There will be sick days. There will be sickness. There
Well,
will be things happening. We have to, I believe that we have to acknowledge that when we're hiring people. But I don't think we do. It's like, yeah, they're just going to do the job. There's going to be stuff because we are human at the beginning, middle, and end of the day.
right.
So I agree with you. It's like, but also to take account, there will be things happening. There's going to be things happening in the family. They're going to have
Mhm.
losses. They're going to have sickness. They're going to have kids doing stuff or whatever. Okay, cool. So is that kind of it? Is that the secret sauce?
Yeah, I mean, it's really not that difficult, right? And this is why
Right.
it was so surprising to me to see so many companies with these challenges, because you think
Mm.
it's human psychology 101, and it's the human experience.
Well, everything's not that difficult. Most people don't want to sell. They have a business and they don't want to sell. It would seem, I don't know, like a no-brainer to assume that a business needs selling,
I think.
but it seems like a shock to most people. You mean I have to sell? So I'm always bewildered. Well, yeah, we do have to sell if you want clients. So some selling's involved. Well, I don't want to sell. So, and I hear this like a lot, like not just coaches, just I've been coaching companies for 13 years and they don't actually say, I don't want to sell. But when I really get down to it, they kind of don't.
and,
So a lot
and
of obvious things are not obvious to people, is what I'm
yeah,
trying to say.
and that's a really good example as well, because a lot of folks have this block, this mental
Mm,
block around selling, because we
mhm,
think of selling as this sleazy, you know, false language type of behavior that we
mm,
bamboozle somebody into buying something. But here's the thing:
right.
people love buying. People
Mhm,
love spending money. But
On certain things.
they hate being sold to.
Exactly. They love buying certain things. Usually it's objects.
Right.
Okay. People love buying objects because it gives them a dope hit. They
Right.
buy that new wonderful handbag and they get a dope hit and then it's sitting in their closet for ages, not being used, or they
Right.
buy a new car. Is this dope hit of consumerism? So they love buying that, but people generally don't love investing in themselves or their business. It's not like, gee, I want to. It's a different kind of money being spent. Okay,
Right.
they'll do it, but it's not like loving spending money on the vacation or on a bag or a car. Do you see the difference of purchasing items that give us some pleasure?
Exactly.
And investing in our businesses. People don't love that. They don't love buying everything.
But people are so afraid to sell because they don't want to be.
Yeah, they don't want to be perceived as somebody who's being pushy.
Right. But here's the thing: we are all selling constantly.
Of course.
Whether you're selling or not, or
Mhm.
as human beings, we're always selling ourselves.
Mhm.
You know, the way that you walk into a room, the way that you're dressed, the smile in your face, how you interact with everybody, you're selling yourself whether you know it or not. You're selling yourself
Absolutely.
to a social crowd of people that decide, do they want to interact with you socially or not? You're selling
100%.
yourself to companies of, do they want to do business with you or not? You're selling yourself
Right.
to potential mates of, do they want to have a relationship with you or not? Right? We're always
Right.
selling ourselves whether we think it or not. So we have to get over this mental block of, I don't like to sell. Like,
Mm.
you're already selling anyway. Might as well get good at it.
Well, the best people in the world are kids. They're the best salespeople in the whole entire world.
Yeah.
Everything they do is pushing the sale of whatever it is that they want forward. Well, Joe, and this has been great. So what's one thing you want to leave everybody with? One mindset or thought that's central to your way of thinking before we close off?
What I would say, can I say two things?
Sure.
So first of all, how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you do everything with excellence and you approach everything in life as if it means that the utmost importance to you, then you'll be proud of everything that you do.
Mm.
And the second thing that I want to say for all the business owners out there, there's always such a focus on revenue, right?
Mhm.
6-figure, 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure, whatever revenue. But here's the thing, revenue, all that does, that feeds your ego.
Mhm.
But profits, at the end of the day, that's what feeds your family. And that's the number
Exactly.
that we need to be focusing on, is how profitable are you?
Amen.
You can have a company that's doing, billions of dollars, but they're losing money. Or you have a company that does $2 million and they make $1 million. And they're more profitable than this company that's, 100 times their size.
Exactly. I've been talking about this for years because there's a lot of like online coaches that were making millions and millions. But when we found out how much money they were spending on ads, they weren't actually making millions and millions. Yeah. So no, I totally agree. Profits are really what's important. Okay. Well, great. Thanks for leaving us with that. And thank you for turning up. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please subscribe. Please share. And also, you can write a review if you like. And we'll see you on the next show.
You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.